Okay, I'm going to turn the floor over to Jen Malkowski, who is a postdoc at Smith College in new media. Her particular focus is on death in new media, so we share that that topic. And she is going to start a new job at Miami University this coming fall in new media studies, comparative media studies. So congratulations, Jen. Okay, thank you.
Okay, because this is an unusually brief time slot for today's keynote, I was advised to skip the formal introduction and get straight into our presentation. It pains me not to have the opportunity to sing the praises of these women, but I will hand things over right away to Alexandra Juhasz, who is Professor of Media Studies at Pitzer College, and to Anne Balsamo, Dean of the School of Media Studies at the New School for Public Engagement in New York. Please join me in welcoming them.
Really delighted to be here to get to see some old friends and colleagues that we've known for a number of years, and to meet new people and to reconnect with some friends who I haven't yet been able to rope into this new project, but you're on my list. We're going to talk today about a collaborative effort that is about 18 months kind of old at this point. And before we do that, and I'm going to start the framing of this, I want to make the point, and we will both do this in different ways, that this project doesn't come from nowhere. It actually comes from individual work, both of mine and Alex's, as well as a number of discussions that we had had over the last 3 to 5 years with groups of feminist scholars, thinking about what kind of infrastructures do we need to support the development and the sustainability of collaborative feminist work. And I just, because they did have issued the invitation to have books available, I just wanted to provide just a very brief context about how this project comes out of the work I've been doing for the last 15 years to think about the relationship between culture and technological innovation and how that is grounded kind of absolutely at the most fundamental level in feminist philosophy and feminist cultural studies. And I won't go into the book in general, but let me just tell you this project that is called Designing Culture. This is a project that I've been working on for 15 years. I think of it as a transmedia project, which means that it does its scholarly, intellectual, academic, and activist work across media. And this is the website that was created for it. And it has, as you can see upstairs, a kind of print artifact. That was the last piece of the project that actually became public. This was published by Duke University Press in 2011. It is a print-based book. It has in it the last chapter, which takes on the question of why write a book in a digital age, especially when the entire project of designing culture is very much about the scholarly possibilities of different kinds of media. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but this is a project that really kind of looks at, again, in a kind of age when our technologies are multiplying, how can we turn these technologies to serve feminist ends. I started this work the year after my first book was finished. So I started this work, the Designing Culture work, thinking about culture, innovation, and feminist aims, the year after the Technologies of the Gendered Body book was completed, and a year before it actually had come out. And the first piece of feminist media work I had done that was very much in conversation with the essay and many feminist scholars, wrestling with the question of the master's tools and can they dismantle the master's house. The first piece of feminist media activism that I did was an interactive documentary of the UN on Women that was held in Beijing in 1995, which was, we think at the time, and perhaps still, the largest gathering on the history of the planet of men and women who were interested in promoting kind of feminist aims. This documentary, which was kind of done on site. I took a team of students to Beijing to work on this. We came back, we reworked it, and so on. Because of shifts in the way in which the technological infrastructure kind of happened, this documentary was started before the web, and it was finished after the web. And in that shift from pre-web to post-web, which many of you may not understand what was at stake there, this project became impossible to circulate. So that the only way it circulated was with myself and Mary Hawks, who's my co-producer on this, was us literally schlepping our machines and sometimes even projectors to women's studies places that in classes that would invite us who knew about it. We had a print-based website, but in fact, it isn't until the print book is published, 2011, that this 1995 interactive documentary will now circulate as a very dusty piece of new media or digital media activism. So in this case, we have an exact reversal of the affordances of tools where the print becomes the avatar for the digital. And if you do ever see this video or this interactive piece, you'll see that it's showing its signs of decay. It cannot be updated very many more times before we'll have this excessive bit rot. It reads and sounds now like a very old LP with cracks and pops and pixelated videos. So just to say that this project, Designing Culture, is a platform for me. It's a platform that organizes much of my scholarly, intellectual, and activist work over the last 15 years, and it is the basis for which we now have kind of started on a new collaborative project. And this new collaborative project, oh, something's not, I'm just cancel. This new collaborative project is called FemTechNet. It is in its planning stages and its embryonic stages. It is, and you're seeing for the first time actually an emergent kind of iteration of a logo. We're really working on our identity system because we're just about ready to create a kind of a space, a signed space on the web. This is a global network of scholars and artists who work at the intersection of science, feminism, science, and technology. As I said, the idea for this was an idea that actually was blossoming in several places. And I didn't even know all of the places that this idea was blossoming because you were actually traveling in many of these other circles. But I had been moving and giving talks about the Designing Culture book in various places, in Copenhagen, in Sydney, in Hong Kong, in Shanghai, throughout the US. And many times the conversation that would ensue with the feminists in the room, I was often not invited by women's studies or feminists groups, but among the feminists in the room, when they would go to these talks, they would say, wow, I wish there was a single network that we had that was even a bulletin board of what's going on across the domains, the disciplines, and the locations where feminist work in science and technology are being done. So I'm like, wow, that's a really great idea. So there was this lamenting that there was so much interesting work going on, but there was no one place where we all went, because we're in different disciplines and we're in different kind of professional networks, and that there was a sense in which we should now have a set of mature tools to help us with this kind of keeping track effort. And that's how it started. Is there just a place where we can keep track of what's going on and where this work is being done? So we started kind of talking about this again in kind of small hive groups and sleeper cells, and it just started accumulating. And then Alex and I, not having known each other personally but knowing each other's work, both living in Southern California, at Alex's invitation, we got together, and once again we started talking about, what are you hearing? What am I hearing? We're hearing about we need a space on the web where we could go to just see what's going on and not have to go to institution or follow our track tracks or rely on formal institutions like our publishing companies. So we started kind of talking through this process. We came up with this name as a kind of shorthand, a feminist technology network. It wasn't really all that interesting of a, I mean, it wasn't very clever, but we started then shorthanding it as FemTechNet. And we started developing a set of objectives, you know, like what would be? Well, it would be to develop innovative uses for digital technologies that support important cultural and social needs. And I put this as the most broad objective because here's what I experienced every time I gave my book talk. And I would say, whatever I was dropping in on, I was giving a talk on designing culture and public interactives, or designing culture and open learning, the open education resource movement, or designing culture and the AIDS Quilt Project. And I would always say that this is grounded in feminist philosophy of science and technology. And it is the foundation from which I understand what innovation is and how we should approach the question of innovation. And every single time someone would say, what does, I mean, and the audience would ask the question in sometimes the most interesting ways, what does feminism have to do with technological innovation? And when you hear that question over and over and again, first of all, they're not reading the book. Obviously, they're asking me to kind of shorthand for that. I'm like, we need to, in the sense of kind of my project, be more able to demonstrate the technological innovations that come out of feminist thinking. So I put that up as one of the objectives that I have kind of been holding dear. I think this is also kind of connecting with a conversation, certainly in the US context, about wanting to involve a greater number of women and girls in discussions about feminism and technology. And so that, I think, meets up with many of the kind of educational and pedagogical and curricular missions of women's studies programs across this country. Again, the objective to demonstrate what the process of feminist innovation would be and is, having and being able to kind of manifest that in a way that would make sense for the audiences. There's another kind of objective that I hold very dear, which is also kind of as a consequence now of having taught in the academy on and off for about 25 years and seeing the way in which students across domains, you know, in 25 years I've never taught in a women's studies curriculum. So I've never, and I will tell you that I had 5 years when I taught courses I was trained to teach in science, technology, and gender. I taught those at Georgia Institute of Technology in the science, technology, and culture curriculum, and I taught them to mainly white male engineering students who were in their last semester of their engineering programs at Georgia Tech, and I was the only humanities class that fit their schedule. So my experience teaching feminist science and technology, anything in the academy, has always been to hostile audiences. I have not had the privilege or the good fortune to be kind of associated with women's studies programs. But as I have continued to teach this work and have worked with students, what I understand is that the digital archive that students are increasingly relying on has a paucity of information about the long history of the engagement of women, feminist, science, technology, innovation, invention. And so part of this is trying to really kind of fix our sights on making sure that this digital archive does not get does not forget these important histories. Thus, you know, the subtitle of my book is called The Technological Imagination at Work. The first chapter is called Gendering the Technological Imagination. I have a project that I'm thinking about the feminist technological imagination. And then basically to educate women, or to educate people about the historical relationship among women and technological innovation. Again, this is a history that it gets repeatedly forgotten. And then finally, I think one of the ways in which we kind of converged because of Alex's work on thinking about the affordances, the pedagogical affordances of new technologies, especially YouTube, we converged on, let's think about a project to rethink the design of online education through a feminist logic and informed by feminist pedagogy. And we then kind of started the process, this emergent process, from two people sitting in a coffee shop in LA to going to a conference and talking to a few people together and so on. Our process involved these steps: activating an extensive network. We didn't have to create the network, we just had to activate it. It was already, in some respects, kind of preceding us. To stage distributed discussions in different locations. We formulated a project that I'm going to tell you about. We're cultivating first a single affinity community, and now we're seeing multiple affinity communities. We have been conducting a creative inventory of resources. This is not a project that has funding from any single source, but everyone has something to contribute to it. We've been facilitating discussions, plannings, enactments. We're now in the process of creating a digital space. We're testing and experimenting. We will reflect, revise, reiterate, and then we will create a calendar for the project going forward starting in September of 2013. So the project is called the DOCC 2013, Dialogues on Feminism and Technology. This is a distributed, open, collaborative course. It will take place from September through December 2013. A DOCC is not a MOOC. We're considering a DOCC as a feminist genre of MOOC. And here are some of the founding principles of this notion of the DOCC. It recognizes and engages the expertise that is distributed throughout a network. It understands learning is a mixed mode and blended experience. It is staging the collaborative design of an open learning experiment. We want to enable and support peer-to-peer learning. We are collaborating, and this is probably the kind of broad intellectual objective. We are collaborating on the annotation of the digital historical cultural archive, and we want to, wherever possible, create the infrastructure to allow people to incorporate feminist pedagogies. Now, if you look at this Coursera diagram, this is pretty much the template for most MOOCs that have captured and animated the popular imagination in the U.S. over the last 18 months. Coursera being one of the two now for-profit companies that are in the business of providing anyone the infrastructure for running MOOCs. MOOCs, as you know, stand for Massively Open Online Courses. Coursera builds itself as the largest MOOC platform online. It serves, as they say, 1.5 million enrolled students. It hosts 200 courses. I don't know if that's accurate. And it very clearly prides itself in that it hosts these for 25 elite schools like Princeton, Brown, Duke, UPenn, and Columbia. Wonderful, incredibly great institutions that sometimes I have to say I parody at. I parody as brand U. And anyway, so we are mounting a kind of critique of this MOOC kind of genre by not kind of going, and we've got articles and some interviews written about this, not going kind of directly kind of to take issue with the MOOCs, but to do our own thing that manifests a different logic. So instead, we think of what we're doing as a kind of distributed network, much messier, much less fixed, and certainly much less about expertise from a central location pouring into these kind of empty vessels of people who are atomized from one another and so on. This is a gesture of a graphic. We will do the actual networked mapping graphic once we have the classes running and so on. But our main, so right now, this DOCC has 15 affiliated classes, what we call Nodal Classes. These are just classes that have been proposed by people we've met in conversations like this, and they say, okay, I'd like to offer one here and so on. We are not offering a single course. Every class will offer the syllabus that makes sense within the curriculum for the level of student that they teach within their institutional environment. But what we're asking the nodal classes to do in their kind of their structure of affiliation is to agree during their class that they are offering during September through December or August through December of 2013 Oh, and I just want to say, so 15 were primarily located in the U.S. We do have a couple universities, one in Canada, one in the U.K., and so on. By all accounts, this is a U.S. kind of started effort, but it should not, and it does not necessarily need to be limited to the U.S. It's really just kind of a matter of the reach of our conversations. We ask that the courses affiliate by having their students log on to the FemTechNet Commons, which is what is in the process of being built right now. And there, what they will have is once a week for that time period, from September till December, we will post a video that we are now in the process of creating, what we're calling video dialogues. These are videoed taped conversations between two feminist scholars on a particular topic. This one, the first three were done at Brown University with the support from a small grant from the Pembroke Center 2 weeks ago. And this one is Feminism, Technology, and Machine. This one features Kelly Dobson and Wendy Chun. And this was one of those magic moments when I'm interviewing them. It's kind of think it's like behind inside the artist or inside the actor's studio, and at one point in the middle of this, I kind of knew they were going to do this. Wendy and Kelly decide to perform Machine, and so I asked them a question, and they just start going like this. We do not compute. And so they were really kind of playing with the kind of performance between kind of high theoretical discourse and literally this kind of vibrant matter. That's what we were calling them, the vibrant matter. We also had an incredible video dialogue with Lisa Nakamura and Maria Fernandez at Cornell University on the topic of feminism, technology, and race. The dialogues are about an hour long. They have a particular trajectory, kind of what has been done, when did this topic, feminism, technology, and kind of come onto the agenda. So race, machine, sexualities. Julie Levin-Russo with Faith Wilding was our third video dialogue on the topic of feminism, technology, and sexuality. Another magic moment to capture. These video dialogues, what's the historical engagement? What inspires you? How does it kind of play out in your work? And what questions are on the horizon? Very simple arc to the discussion. The second piece that we're asking nodal courses and instructors to commit to is a shared pedagogical activity called Storming Wikipedia, which is writing women and feminism back into the cultural archive, focusing now on Wikipedia, and Wikipedia across languages. We will start by, we are actually right now having a distributed close reading of Wikipedia to try to understand where are the places where women should be that they aren't, where are the discussions where feminist contributions should be but they are not. A simple thing is just looking at the long list of 500 names that is at the end of Autumn Stanley book and see if any of those names have Wikipedia pages, and going back and trying to create a kind of a close reading and a laundry list of the missing information in the cultural archive known as Wikipedia, that really kind of is a testimony to these forgotten histories. And we can change this, right? And it's not going to be easy, and it may be taking Wikipedia's editorial kind of structure to task. And we're prepared to document every time a page gets put up and gets taken down, which is happening regularly and frequently whenever feminist work is being inserted. We are prepared to document it and make it a public statement about how unfriendly and the gendered division of labor of authoring Wikipedia has been and what it is having and what impact it's having on this kind of supposedly democratic form called Wikipedia. And then finally, and this is where I'm going to turn over to Alex, the Commons should be a place to load and upload and archive shared learning materials. There's a theoretical group, a theoretical project that I think is really kind of being housed at the UC FemTechNet group, which is an offshoot of this. Lisa Cartwright, Lisa Parks, really thinking through the STS concept of boundary objects, making that bringing that into conversation with the design of digital learning objects that learn, and trying to work through the understanding what are boundary objects that learn. This is actually quite a theoretically kind of charged and packed conversation that I think we will be able, in this kind of context, will be able to elaborate with some kind of real examples. I'm not going to talk about the rest of it, but this again would be places where people can load syllabi and bibliographies and so on. So I want to just give a shout out to another collaborative effort that was going on. And again, this is that moment when it's an idea whose time has come, but it's not FemTechNet that is the idea, right? So if you go to fembotcollective.org, this was an effort started by Carol Stabile and Kim Sawchek, and this is now being hosted under Carol's kind of directorship at the University of Oregon. Fembotcollective.org just launched ADA, which is the online journal of feminism, science, technology, and media. It had its first online issue. It's a peer-reviewed online journal for this kind of feminist work. They have a number of very creative things, like Books Aren't Dead, the Bad series, which is a review of print-based books, Not Another Potluck. I mean, there's really kind of an interesting site that's kind of fueled with some very good kind of feminist kind of humor. They very graciously, very early, offered to host our listserv. So if you go to the fembotcollective.org, you'll see that there is a tab that says information about FemTechNet, and they're hosting our listserv, and so that's the way in which we can, you can join the discussions, at which point we will announce that when the FemTechNet Commons gets up. So that is the setup for the discussion that I think Alex is going to put more substance to, and let me pull that up. Okay, thanks. Oh, you're going to do it off of that? That's your website. Yeah, that's okay.
Of course.
Okay, so thanks, Anne. I guess before I begin, mine's real hands-on. And I wanted to make 3 points more generally before I just talk to you about teaching this course, the beta version of the course. One, and about feminist organizing, feminist pedagogy, feminist technology today. One is that Anne and I have lives as academics, and we write our books, and we do our scholarship, but this is an organizing project. And we are producing, with a large network of people, a place to share information, a place to teach from. And I think that it has something to do with women of a certain age coming into conversation, and I don't just mean Anna now, I mean the network of probably 100 or more women that I've spoken to at this point, thinking about the kinds of power we do and we do not have, and we really do have quite a bit of power, and we really don't have quite a bit of power. Most of us have come into, I'm a full professorship, have quite a bit of institutional power at our own institutions. And what we've realized in making this network is that the network is about sharing that institutional power. So we built this thing in 18 months almost entirely from the kinds of resources we can get locally at our own institutions, and then we're sharing them. So Fembot Collective is a perfect example of that. That's what Carol built at University of Oregon, and she's sharing it with us. It's a kind of power sharing and power growing of resources with a feminist model. So one thing is we're doing is organizing. The other thing is this is very much about teaching. So I'm going to talk to you now about my teaching and a little bit about what it's like to teach the DOCC 2013. It's in beta right now. How do I make it the slideshow? I'm not very PowerPoint savvy. Okay. This is, I'm going to talk to you about teaching the class, the DOCC 2013, right now. I'm in the middle of the semester. And the beta version of the class has 4 homes. So we'll go from 4 to 15. The 4 homes are myself at Pitzer College, is a small liberal arts college. I'm teaching 6 undergraduate students who are advanced students in women's studies and media studies. My co-collaborator, so we are actually team teaching in the same class as Radhika Gajala at Bowling Green State University. She is teaching 15 undergraduates in an entirely online class, and these students are general education students. Almost all of them are not of a non-traditional age, so they're returning students. They're living at home in largely rural environments. They're extremely different from the students that I'm teaching. The learning experience, it couldn't be farther apart. And then 2 graduate classes are folding on to the shared class that Radhika and I are teaching, students at USC and students at UCSD. And they're involved in a variety of ways, interfacing with our students and then engaging in their own projects. One of the things that's been incredibly complicated thinking about an effort at this size, because we're not a MOOC, so again, I want to talk about that idea of feminist resource sharing, the power we have, the power we don't have, the resources we have, we don't have. We don't have Stanford giving us however much money Stanford gave them to produce the MOOC. And so we are building our class as feminists always have and feminists will, as a DIY effort, using the tools that we can, using tools that are already built, and that comes with all of the troubles that you are aware of. So we're scattered across a variety of platforms, one of which is Sakai, which is our at Pitzer. I won't go into it, but perhaps you use it. And we're on Sakai because Canvas, which Radhika teaches with, is closed. We can't even enter it. So we've ported all her students into Sakai, and most of the learning is happening there in an extremely cumbersome and clunky way. And therefore, because Sakai is cumbersome and clunky, we have a whatever. It's not my computer, so nothing's linking. But we have a Facebook page, and we have a Vimeo page for all the video that we're making, and I will show you that again in a second. And then there's a lot of Skyping. And the Skyping is both between Radhika and myself, and we are engaging in probably weekly conversations about teaching this class together, but also between Radhika and her students, because Radhika is teaching a fully online class that with incredibly complicated material. I'll get to that in a second. And the online structure that she's teaching through on Canvas provides almost no opportunities for her to engage in the hard, close to face-to-face work of teaching these materials. So she Skypes all the time with her students. I meet my students face-to-face. We're sharing one undergraduate syllabus. The syllabus is organized around 10 themes. The 10 themes were produced in our strange, unwieldy, and collaborative and lovely process where 5 women would meet and sort of make a list, and then we'd be at a conference, and then 20 women would meet, and then we'd meet again. And over the course of this flexible, adapting process, we chose 10 themes. It ultimately became 12. Those 12 themes are what the dialogues are going to be about. Each week, when I teach this class with my students and Radhika teaches the class with the students, the themes have 2 readings by preeminent feminist thinkers. My students think about the theme through the readings. The readings are insanely difficult for undergraduates, and it's been really interesting teaching them to my students, and I think you'll see, because I'm going to show you their work, that it's been very productive for them. The course that I'm teaching with Radhika, and again, just to be clear, when we do the DOCC 2013 in the fall with 15 schools, everyone can teach the course the way they want. What we'll be doing this summer, the 15 nodes, will be sharing ideas about teaching and saying, well, the week that we're doing machine, I was thinking of doing this project. Would you like to join me? Yes. Don't want to join me? No. It's a very flexible buy-in, buy-out sort of model. But we're engaging in creative projects with our students. That's wiki work, which Anne began to mention. Keyword videos, which I will show you in a second. And we're ending with a craft project. I can't show you examples of the craft project, so I'll describe that before I move forward, which is that every student in the class, so my 6 students, Radhika's 15 students, have to make something with their hands that represents the ideas of machine, the 10 themes, machine, sexuality, race, archive, ethics, etc. And then they have to group through the internet. So my students are in California, her students are in Bowling Green, and produce one platform to share all the machine objects. So they have to describe what those machine objects have in common and represent them on the internet, and then they have to exchange the things they made as a gift exchange with each other, so everyone will leave with something that somebody else made. Now, a lot of the work of the course for me has been about collaborating with Radhika. It's really been about a feminist collaboration between the two of us as teachers. And so I'm going to share with you now a 7-minute video where Radhika and I are talking about that together, because I couldn't represent that couldn't represent that myself.
Yay. Hi. I was just going to type to you saying it's working, I think, because I can see myself. So we are going to have a short conversation that I'm going to show at the Mediating Public Spheres, Genealogies of Feminist Knowledge in the Digital Age conference, which is happening at Mount Holyoke. And what I'm hoping that you and I can talk about is both the ways in which working together on our DOCC 2013 beta class has been incredibly rewarding, and also probably some of the hardest work we've done this semester. Yes. So I would say the first reason for me, and we've discussed frequently, is the surprising differences between our students and our institutional settings, even though it's both, we're doing this within an American higher education context. And do you want to just reflect about that briefly?
Well, one thing I want to say is, I know that we started this thinking about the distributed open course as a way to talk back to the MOOC, so to speak, the massively open online course. And perhaps one of the things that's happening is we're taking the interactivity seriously. And that's your pedagogy, and that's my pedagogy as feminists, or whatever you want to call it. And we're giving them assignments as well that require them, ironically, to interact more with the interface than just reading and doing quizzes. So then that requires multiple kinds of literacy on their part. And to be able to teach this in a different layered class is very difficult. Mine is a fully online class, and I'm also dealing with different age groups, multiple backgrounds, traditional, non-traditional, different levels of familiarity with feminist theory. And so when I try to teach more than summarize the article through the interface, when I say you need to do a keyword video, or you need to develop a material artifact, and then start to insist on frequent Skype meetings, it throws them a little bit off, although they're really liking it, is the sense I get, because that is not the standardized pattern of online teaching set up in the past 10 years.
Right, and of course, there's been an incredible learning curve for me teaching a fully embodied class of only 6 students, thinking about the difference between online and embodied teaching, and to imagine a real MOOC and not a feminist interpretation of a MOOC that is fully online and being distributed to thousands of people in different settings, with, again, like the issues we're having about difference being multiplied in ways I can't even imagine. I've really been thoughtful about the affordances of the face-to-face in relationship to teaching. I mean, that we are teaching extremely difficult materials, and I'm hand-holding my students step by step through Karen Barad or Wendy Chun. These are new ideas, and my job as a teacher is to look at their faces, to understand what they do and don't know, and to engage in dialogue and slowly get them to understand this. And I know that that's not something that's really possible for you in the online platform you're teaching with, nor in any traditional MOOC. That's been really
important for me to learn. But I think the other difference is that my students are so different from your students, and the educational environment is so different. The expectations of the place are so different. So my students are advanced level undergraduates who already have a commitment to women's studies and media studies, are generally left in their ideology, share expectations that it's the right thing for them to do to struggle with difficult theoretical material, and have been authorized in our learning culture to be extremely interactive and somewhat demanding of the student-professor relationship. And I just don't think that characterizes your students or the institutional setting. And
well, it characterizes particular students, but not on an average the whole group. So which is why even the students who want to do that and who are actually blossoming in these expectations were initially slightly surprised, even if it's pleasantly surprised, because it doesn't fit the pattern.
Right. Now, I'm mindful of time, so I'm going to wrap up, but I did want to say what's been interesting for my students is this self-reflexive feminist process and pedagogy for themselves, where they're interacting with someone who's quite different from themselves in a learning environment and taking on that role with an ethical and ethical generosity, which again I think can't be built into a MOOC, but it's also extremely time-consuming and is asking them to do something that not all students do, it particularly undergrad students. And I think we can see that reflected in our process as well. So that's what I wanted to end with. We end up having to talk a lot. We end up having to process a lot. Thank goodness we share a vocabulary, feminist vocabulary, and a women of colorist vocabulary, and a vocabulary that thinks about difference.
And also an ideology of teaching.
Exactly. But you know, we wanted to end by talking about the kind of labor, the real labor that would undergird a feminist response to a MOOC that's not written into, again, the hard labor of a MOOC. So why don't you end with that, and we will sign off.
Well, I would say that is that is where the subversive potential of what we're doing is. It is in our involved labor, and ironically, it is going to be unpaid affective labor that women are often responsible for. So we cannot put a MOOC out there and say we're empowering everyone because it's out there, but we know that it takes grassroots involvement. And so I would say that for this project that you and Anne have initiated, some of the subversive possibilities come through the engaged pedagogy that we're all exploring together.
Okay, well, thank you so much. I wish we had more time, but I'm sure that at the conference people will continue to ask questions, and I will hope to do my best to represent what we've learned together.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye.
So here's one of my students blogging on working across difference, which has really been a lot of the project on my students' end. She writes, the cultural differences between the online class and the Pitzer class have been both significant and valuable. For some reason I can't scroll. Likewise, the difference in pedagogy between the two establishments are both apparent and elusive as we move through the semester in our strictly digital connection. Via the Claremont College's online portal, I've enjoyed acquainting myself with the Bowling Green students and recognizing their distinct qualities. So for my students, thinking about how online experience engages them to have conversations with fellow students they would never have has been a tremendous amount of the learning and understanding that as a feminist process. Now, we have been doing this wiki work, and here's a video, short video about that project. I just need help because I can't scroll. How do I get there? Is that it? Just try it again. There it is. It's just too big.
There it is. Okay.
Can you make it a little smaller?
There we go. should
Okay.
try that.
So this is what this looks like.
Release the cyborgs. Cyborg. Cyborg. Release the cyborgs.
And then every class, we read two authors, and in my pedagogy, I have my students in real time sort of make something in relationship to what we read. So when we were reading about machines, I think, we read Alondra Nelson and Karen Barad, and the students were asked to take a photograph and write a blurb during that class and as the project, and these are some of the things they made. I'm sorry, it was Lucy. So this is another one, Lucy Suchman and Wendy Chun, and she made Programs Come with a White Penis by Default. Another student made Female Robots Don't Have to Have Metal Breasts. This is another sort of assignment that we did in real time, thinking about Shuli Chang and Karen Barad. Matter comes to matter through the iterative interactivity of the world and its becoming. This idea was taken from, this is Jade Ulrich's writing. This idea was above taken from Karen Barad's Posthumanist Performativity towards an understanding of how matter comes to matter, and it can be applied to a piece of digital art by Shuli Chang called Compositing the Net. And she writes, I think of each of the words that fall from the top of the screen as individual phenomena, but when the phenomena interact with each other, iterative interactivity, they produce a brand new phenomena, that of the sprouts that are born from this composting. Chang notes how humans are often interested in recycling, but recycling as a process often involves using a lot of energy and results in a great waste. Instead of recycling, I think Barad's idea of interactivity would be more interested in composting, as is a natural and organic process that involves no waste. Creating new phenomena from separate phenomena can be seen as becoming being a structure in which no dominance of one thing over another is at the core of this philosophy. And then the last thing that we do is keyword videos. It's a larger project, FemTechNet initiative, and we have templates that if you're interested in joining this, you can learn from here. These are all just examples of how anyone who wanted to make a keyword FemTechNet video could model a production of video, and they're available there. And then my students and Radhika's have been doing them as their midterms. And I'll just end with 2 keyword videos. Each one is better than the next. And then we'll open the floor up to conversation. So this one is by A.J. Strout.
There you go.
And it's called, it's on our theme word difference.
Welcome to FemTechNet. My keyword is difference, and I want to talk about the cyberfeminist approach to sexual difference. First, I'd like to talk a bit about cyberfeminism by defining some of its traits. Cyberfeminism is a postmodernist feminism. It's a new feminism. It's a contemporary movement whose ideologies are deeply vested in cyberspace, the internet, and technology. Not only do cyberfeminists utilize these constructs as a form of progress for their cause, they also deconstruct and theorize their uses and their histories. Ultimately, cyberfeminists are interested in linking the body with machines and technology, which brings me to how cyberfeminists approach sexual difference. The most dominant cyberfeminist perspective adopts a positive or utopian view of cyberspace and the internet. Cyberfeminists see the internet and other forms of technology as a way to dissolve gender and sexual difference. They aim to eliminate discrimination through the use of machines and technology. For example, because the internet allows anonymity, cyberfeminists can construct for themselves a genderless identity. This makes cyberfeminist work extremely valuable. While many feminists believe that the permanent dissolution of social constructs is impossible because of the value of culture and tradition, having the option to explore new identities can have positive uses. As our world becomes increasingly reliant on telecommunication for activities like self-expression and specific types of work, the individual has the ability to engage in these opportunities without bias. There are, however, issues that can come from this practice. The intentional dissolution of race, culture, and gender creates new forms of invisibility because these constructs ultimately come with experience, history, and identity. Ignoring these elements of a person's identity, in my opinion, is a new form of oppression. An individual should not have to hide their identity in order to achieve equality. We should embrace difference rather than dissolve it. On the other hand, we do not yet live in a world where equality is the norm, which is why cyberfeminism is so important. My name is AJ. Thank you for watching. I invite you to respond to this video by creating another video using the keywords culture, or identity, or technofeminism.
That's it.